As we're looking at modern innovations in music, one of the pioneers that we still talk about a lot, even though he's no longer with us, is the composer John Cage. Sounds like a good American name, doesn't it? It's because he is a good American guy. He was from California, and California, even in the 40s and 50s, as it is now, was sort of the place that different things happen. You know, if there's something kind of weird going on in the world, we think, oh, it must be California, right? So he lived in California, where he was influenced by a lot of different kinds of cultures. You know, there are a lot of Chinatowns in major cities in California. There are all sorts of different cultural influences coming in, and he studied those things. He was very much interested in Asian cultures, Asian religion, Asian music. So one of the things that he did, which is sort of his big significant contribution to innovations in music in the 20th century, was to create a new way of playing the piano. When we talked about the modern era and the kinds of musical things that were happening, one of the things that we saw was that composers would take instruments that have been around for a very long time and play them in different kinds of ways. And so that's what John Cage did. We're going to look at what he did with that in a minute, but just sort of give you an idea of some of the other interesting things that he did. He did a lot of music that we call chance music or aleatoric music, which is not just, stand on the corner and listen to things happen. It actually has structure, but there's an element of what could happen in the middle of it. One of the pieces that he's most famous for is called 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And what happens in this piece is that there's a piano on the stage, the performer comes out onto the stage, sits at the piano, and they sit there for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. They never play the piano at all. So what's the music in that? What becomes the music is everything that happens in the building, all the sounds that you hear while that pianist is not playing. So you might imagine that the first time that this was performed, people were, waiting very patiently. They applauded when they came out, and then they waited for something to happen, and then nothing happens, and you can imagine that people might have started muttering to each other. They might have started flipping through their program, trying to figure out why there's nothing happening on the stage, what am I supposed to be hearing? All of that became the music. And at 4:33, the performer gets up and bows and goes off. That's one thing he did. Another piece he did, he had a set of radios on the stage. And each radio has a performer, an operator. And they would have their music, their score that tells them what to do. And so they were told, all right, so tune your radio to this frequency for this long, at this volume level. So we've controlled all the things that we can control on the radio. And the next person has their instructions, the next person has theirs. So there's however many radios. Each person has their own instructions about what to do with their radio and for how long. Well, what happens? That performance is going to be different depending on where you are when you do it, because the radio stations will be different. Perhaps the frequency that person was told to tune to doesn't even have a station. Maybe it's just static, so you just get white noise and static for 30 seconds or however long, while other radios are playing different things. So it's structured. You have to do a specific thing for a specific amount of time, but the chance becomes, what's the sound source that's coming in to that radio? So those are the kinds of things that people were experimenting with, and John Cage obviously did some very interesting experiments. So as I said, he was interested in Asian music, and he became very interested in particular in a Southeast Asian type of ensemble called a gamelan. And in a gamelan, what you have is a variety of mostly percussive kinds of instruments, but they're not marimbas and xylophones and things like that we're used to. They are made out of, in many cases, they would be like a brass bell mounted on something, and maybe there would be 10 different ones in different sizes. So you have a massive long instrument that the performer would go up and down playing. Or you might have something that looks sort of like a marimba where you have bars that you play, but it has a very unique sound. So let's listen to a little bit of gamelan music just so you get the sense of the sound that John Cage is trying to create in the next thing that we're going to talk about. Okay, that video is much longer. If you want to listen, you can hear all the different kinds of things that happen. But you get a sense of the sound here. It almost sounds like toy piano sort of things, again, because it's a very metallic sort of sound. And you can see that in most cases, they're striking their instruments with some sort of metal hammer device. So it's a very percussive effect. He liked this sound, and he wanted to figure out some way to create the same sort of sound without having to have all these people and all these instruments, and to use something that we already had available to us. So what did he do? He went into his piano room. Got this nice grand piano sitting here, thinking, how can I make that happen? Because this is something that's pitched, so we know we've got pitches we can work with. How can I get those sounds out of the piano? Which obviously doesn't sound like that. What he did was come up with what we now call the prepared piano. Prepared piano. And as we'll see when we watch the video of someone actually playing one, inside the piano, in the strings, which, we've looked at that when we looked at the piano in detail, he puts things in the strings. In this case, you're going to see a lot of metal screws stuck in between the strings of the notes. So we put these metal pieces in here between the strings that were vibrating. That's going to limit how much vibrating they can do, so you can get a more percussive sound that way. And you're also going to get the metal. Now the screw's going to vibrate as well, so you got a whole new sound quality. He also would do things like, and I don't think there are any in this particular one, but you might put pieces of paper, thread them in between the strings, so they sort of dampen the thing, and you get a more of a sort of sound to it. You could put erasers on top of the strings, anything that's going to make the string vibrate in a different way. So do we just randomly go put those in there? No. If you look at the score, which is the musical piece of paper that we work from, there's a whole long list, and it's very specific. It'll say, like, take a 2 1/4 inch galvanized steel screw and put it between the second and third strings of the G4 on the piano, which is the numbering system we use so we know which of the G's that is. So you, the person who is preparing the piano, has to get the right kind of screw, put it in the right place. He even tells you how far away from the tuning pegs and everything. So everything is very specific because he wants you to get the right sound at the end. If you don't do it the way he did it, you're not going to get the sound that he was creating. So let's listen now to a sonata. So he's using a very old formal structure, which you're going to call it a sonata, a sounding piece, on prepared piano. So the video is great because it actually shows you the interior view of the piano, so you can see what's been done, and then you'll see that the pianist is really just playing the piano, so you can tell this is not a trick.